Welcome to the LaRouche organization. My name is Dave Christie, and I am joined by Richard Freeman of Executive Intelligence Review. Richard has contributed an article to the Great Reset white paper that will be released by Executive Intelligence Review this week, and is here to give us a sense of his article entitled Following George III, How Prince Charles Created and Controls the Green New Deal. So certainly, Richard, you draw out a lot of the history of the British monarchy's role in the involvement of the creation of environmentalism, certainly touching on aspects that Mr. LaRouche had launched as an initiative back in 94 when he was released in prison that led to a special report that we put out on the late 90s that was entitled The True Story Behind the Fall of the House of Windsor. But perhaps, Richard, you could just give us a sense. What is this British monarchy, the British Empire? What does that actually look like?
Okay. Well, what this involves is on January 11th, Prince Charles, released this call for a program. It's called Terra Carta, or Earth Charter, for Nature, People, and Planet. And the point of this is to push through a green genocide program of population reduction, which is the subject of the entire report we're putting out, shut down agricultural and manufacturing production, build a $40 trillion green speculative bubble, all implemented through a central banker's dictatorship. Now, this Charles derives the capability. He's been the lead figure in this for the last 40 to 50 years. He was pushing some of these aspects in the 80s and 90s when most of the people that you associate with the green movement had no conception of this. So he kept using this. But he derives his capability not from himself, certainly, but from being embedded in a network of institutions. One such institution is the monarchy, which consists not just of the royals, but hundreds of persons from Oxford, from Cambridge, financial institutions, and so forth. The monarchy itself is embedded in a quartet of institutions: the monarchy, the City of London, the Bank of England, and the three principal intelligence services in Britain: MI5, MI6, GCHQ. And this grouping of quartet has been in operation since 1694, when the Bank of England was first founded. And their intention is to use the green question to actually bring back a program that was done from 1932 to 45 by Hitler, Hajjamar Schacht, his finance minister, and the head of the Reichsbank. It's a mission that they thought was not fully completed, and so they are rerunning it again. But peel back the green, and you will see the concentration camps, you will see environmentalism, the reduction of the human race by at least 4/5.
Well, certainly there was great embarrassment once the role of the European monarchies, the British, the Dutch, etc., in terms of their role in sponsoring not only Adolf Hitler, but the rise of the fascist movements in general. That, of course, had its roots in eugenics and race theory, which they were involved in. And certainly what your article covers is that environmentalism came from eugenics. Maybe you could draw that out for us.
Absolutely. I just want to give two quotes from people who were involved in this. And I will just use the World Wildlife Fund because this quartet and other institutions around the world thought that this was a World Wildlife Fund for Nature, which changed the World Wildlife Fund, which was created in 1961. They thought this was a useful platform to take these broader conceptions and bring out the environmentalism. And I think we'll see, Dave, that this is the basis on which you can see how they shifted things. One is a quote from Prince Philip, who's the father of Prince Charles, and who groomed him along with a few other people, and of course is the husband of Queen Elizabeth II. And this is the quote, "I just wonder what it would be like to be reincarnated in an animal whose species have been so reduced in numbers that it was in danger of extinction. What would its feeling be towards the human species whose population explosion had denied it somewhere to exist? I must confess that I am tempted to ask for reincarnation as a particularly deadly virus." And this is from a 1987 book. It's a foreword that he wrote to this book. The book was called If I Were an Animal. And then he repeated this quote in 1988 to a German news agency. So he's one of the principal people who founded the World Wildlife Fund and would, of course, direct his son. Another is a person by the name of Julian Huxley. People may be familiar with his brother Aldous Huxley. And he founded the Eugenics Society in Britain in 1907. After the war, after people realized the horror of what eugenics was, race science, but it wasn't just against Jews, although it was, of course, Gypsies, Poles, Russians, Slavs who were killed in the millions. And this was to be a world program. Julian Huxley founded what's called UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And this is what he wrote in 1946 as to say what UNESCO was about. It was to revive eugenics. You have to remember that the rubble from the war, this is 46, is still warm. And he's already talking about bringing back eugenics. Quote, I'll just summarize a few features, but this is a quote. This is his view of man. The dead weight of genetic stupidity, physical weakness, mental instability, and disease proneness, which already exist in the human species, will prove too great a burden for real progress to achieve. Thus, even though it is quite true that many radical eugenic policies will be for many years politically and psychologically impossible, and I'll skip, it is time that the public mind is informed of the issues at stake so that much that is now unthinkable may become thinkable. Bring back eugenics. But they couldn't call it that. So what did they call it? Environmentalism. And they said, well, of course, we're making environment pure.
Well, exactly. And then literally Huxley was the first president of the World Wildlife Fund in the early 60s, as you described it, while also the president of the British Eugenics Society. So that's as direct as it gets. Now, maybe just I think you obviously mentioned Charles, you mentioned his father, but Charles' role, as you draw out in the article, in creating this great reset, going back really to the 90s. I mean, obviously the families go way back, but maybe you could just give us a snapshot of what Charles actually did leading up to this moment of what's now being called the Great Reset, but clearly it's a long time been in planning.
Exactly. I'll just mention a couple of features, and people can get more as they read the article. One was the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. Charles, a year before it was put together, under the suggestion of his father and another member of this World Wildlife Fund, Maurice Strong, who became the chairman of this Rio Summit, brought people together, and Charles played a leadership role. He was now 44, and he was stepping out and assigned a leadership role. And at Rio, there were 130 heads of government and 38,000 people. What they did is they took this idea that there is such a thing as climate change, which of course climate change existed, has always existed, but it was anthropomorphic, it was anthropogenic. Man was creating the climate to go up in temperature. And they made that the fundamental principle of the conference. Before it had been by the UN, the IPCC, saying, well, it's partly man, partly nature. Now it was all man. They passed various resolutions to get rid of greenhouse gases like nitrous oxides, carbon dioxide, sulfates, and so forth. And this would become then enforced in the 1997 Kyoto summit. And basically what this guy, Maurice Strong, who was the chairman of the conference and very close to Prince Philip, stated is that we may need, this is almost a quote, we may need the collapse of industrial civilization to bring this agenda about. And this then launched every 5 years subsequently these environmentalist summits, which were really on the basis of how do you take down the creative capabilities of man, targeting him and targeting his expression, which is normally to raise up the qualities of agriculture, of education, and so forth, manufacturing, to take it in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Well, look, I think we see the direction, what the intention is. We see the roots of this in fascism and eugenics and so on. And certainly, your article draws that whole history out. Maybe just to end, what do we do? What would you say to somebody watching or visiting the LaRouche organization site? What do we do?
Well, what we would do, and I just want to mention in this regard very briefly, the Charles and his associates, a guy named Jonathan Port, who's a real Malthusian, and a guy named Tony Juniper, and they were developed in the article. They developed the Green New Deal in 2008 in Britain. So when you hear Ocasio-Cortez and you hear Ed Markey of Massachusetts as senator and Bernie Sanders developed this, they didn't. It was totally done by Charles. And this is the primary agenda item, not the only one, that our president, Joseph Biden, is going to be following through, and the Congress and the both Senate and the House are supposed to be whipped into putting through a policy which will lead to the extinction of the human race. And I think if you begin from that standpoint and you look back, what we have to do is not only expose this, but we have to propose a counter, which is to develop the world with a $1.5 billion new productive jobs, develop Africa, develop Asia, rebuild America, revive the policies of Roosevelt and Lincoln, take it even beyond that, go into outer space as we have 3 probes from different countries approaching Mars, reassert the question of human creativity and existence, and use that and this mobilization of economics and a complete exposure of what these guys stand for to bring down Charles, to bring down all of those agencies, not just temporarily as happened after World War II, but entirely forever.
Sounds good. I think that is a good place to end. Thank you very much, Richard, for joining us. And for all of you watching, circulate this white paper that will be released this week, get it out far and wide, support the LaRouche organization, and get a sense of Mr. LaRouche's insights into physical economics, because this is goes to the heart of what Richard just said of how we actually defeat them by creating a force for the good. So join us in the future. Thank you very much. Bye.